Right, now that we are on to the next page, which is timers, that's going to be working with inputs in addition to the outputs that we've already learned to do by turning the LEDs on and off. This time we're going to use a form of a switch as an input. If you haven't watched this video already on switches, I want you to stop and go back and do that first. Okay, so we're going to need to construct this circuit right here. This is going to be the same circuit that you had previously built on your board, and which should still be there. You're simply going to be adding these two wires. Now they can be any color wire, but you'll need two of them. Notice that this one is connected to D12. It's in that same column as D12. So we're going to be using D12 or port 12 as an input. And this wire here is actually connected. If you follow it through, it connects through the strip in the breadboard down to ground or negative. Okay, so really what's going to be happening is when we touch this wire here to this wire, well, that'll basically be connecting D12 to a negative or a low when they touch. Okay, so it's like a switch essentially, that when they're touching, it's like pressing a switch like a doorbell or an elevator. And then when they're not touching, it's like letting go of the elevator or doorbell switch. Okay, so we're going to just use the wires as a switch. So touching would be pressed, not touching would be not pressed. All right, so pause the video and construct this circuit. Constructed, we should have the addition of these two wires right here. This is the one that I have built, and I've added my two wires right here. So now I have it set so that, or I'll program it so that when I touch these, I'll make something happen, like a light turn on or blink or something like that. And then when they're not touching, I'll have it turn off or do something else. So here we go. First thing you're going to want to do then is understand how to use these additional bricks, which we have right here, which are logic bricks. So we know how to do the input and output. We know how to work with time. So this is the last for now. It's the if block, and we can set it so that if something happens, like the wires are being touched, we can have it do something like flash LEDs, or if the wires aren't being touched or the button isn't being pressed, we could have it do this instead. So we can do this, but if it's not doing this, we could have it do this instead. Okay, but remember, it only does the do if this statement up here is true or if it happens. Okay, so like if the wires touch, then it would do this. If the wires weren't touching, it would just sit here and do this instead. Okay, so we can make it so that we can get rid of the else if we want to, but this brick shows it with it in place. We're going to ultimately be able to program the Arduino to do these two things. These are the challenges, and these will be turned in for credit. This is a 10-second timer, and there's a video that shows how it will work, and then there's this one here, which again, there's also a video that shows how it will work. But right now we'll focus on these bricks. Okay. This might look familiar to you. This was the railroad crossing setup where they would just go back and forth between the green and the red. I'm going to modify this program so that when I touch the wires, it'll flash these. And then when I'm not touching the wires, they'll just be off. Okay, so you'll notice I changed the time to make it 100 milliseconds. So it'll be fast. They'll flash back and forth. So the logic is what we want to bring in here. And this is the brick we want. And remember I said we could have it with an else if we wanted to by clicking on this little icon, and then we could bring the else into here, and that'll update down here. I'm going to have it do that for this one. So what I'll do is add it like that, and now it'll do this whenever what I put here, whenever this is true. And I have to get it in there yet, but it'll be when the wires touch. But when the wires aren't touching, I'm going to have the lights off. Okay, so I do need to add some bricks here to turn the lights off. I'm just going to do that because I know how. That would be 1. And I'll duplicate it. And so we used 2 and 4. Remember, 2 was the red one, 4 was the green one. So I'm going to just turn off 2 and turn off 4. Okay, so right now I need to add right up in here some more logic. I'm going to need this one. Okay, and I'm going to need under digital, I'm going to need this one. And under digital, I'm going to need the read, digital read. Okay, now if you remember, we connected up that one wire to port 12. So that's why I'm changing this to say 12. And then pull up, all you got to know is switch it to say on. Okay, now in English, here's what this says. If the wires that are on 12, high means high means not touching, low means touching. So we want this to say low, meaning touching. Why low? Well, remember, low means negative, right? So we talked about how the fact that if we follow this wired through 12, it goes from here, and if they were touching, it would go to here, and it would go through this strip to ground or negative. So the fact is, whenever this wire touches this wire, it sees a low or a negative. And when they're not touching, the port would actually see a high. So back in our program, we want it to be looking for a low, meaning the wire's touched. Okay, so as soon as the statement's true, meaning the wire's touched, it's going to go and do this. And it'll keep doing this, or I'm sorry, it'll do this once, and then it'll come back here, and as long as the wires are still touching, it'll do it again. And then it comes out, and if this is still touching, it'll do it again, and again, and again. And then as long as the statement's true, it continues to do it. But the second that the wires don't touch anymore, well, that would mean that if they weren't touching, that the port would be high. So this would no longer be a true statement, which means then it would do the else, which would turn off the 2 LEDs. Okay, so this is how our demo program should look right now. If I copied it, get all that code and copy, I can put it into my Arduino sketch here. This is another name for program. Paste it. Your tools you should have board set to nano, old bootloader, and you have the COM port selected, and then you can upload that. Hopefully it gave me an error. See, I must have missed something. Maybe I didn't delete everything. I missed this bottom bracket, so I got to get everything. Copy it, Control C. I'm going to come back, get rid of everything. Paste. Try it again. There we go, uploading and done. So if we take a look at it now, here's my wires. So they aren't touching right now, so it would see a high. Get my program back up so you can see that. Okay, so keep in mind where we're at right now. It's right now going through the program. It's looking to see if I have a low. Okay, I don't have a low because my wires aren't touching. Okay, the second I touch them, there'll be a low and it'll do this. Because right now it's just doing this. It receives this, not true, does this, not true, does this, not true, does this. But now, touch, and because they're touching, it's a low right now. So this is true, it's a low, so it does this. It's true, it's a low, does this. The second they don't touch, it does this. We're going to do one more example where we get rid of this else and just have it do something when the wires are touching. So I've already gotten rid of everything, but I kept this brick right here. I still want to wait so that if the wires on 12 are touching, that it does something. So I'm going to get rid of the else and click on the star again. And I'm just going to have it um, turn on an LED for a certain amount of time and then turn off. So basically, it's similar to the 10-second timer. You can see how similar it is. Very, very similar. Okay, so digital. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write and turn on an LED. At this time, I'll pick 6, one that's connected to 6. So that'll turn on, and I'll have it wait for a second, and then I'll have it turn off. So I'll just simply have it do something after I touch the wires, and this is what it'll do. So I'll grab the code for that, make sure to get it all this time, Control C to copy, come back into here, I'm going to erase everything and paste it in and upload. Okay, and now that we're uploaded, we can take a look at the code side by side with the actual project, and you can see nothing's on currently because the wires are not touching. Right now, the port 12, it sees a high right now. So it's looking at saying if the port is low, then do this, but nope, it's not low, it's high because they're not touching. Second I touch them, it should flash the light for a second. Touch, flashes for a second. Notice I only have to touch it super briefly to make that trigger and start the process. So that fraction of a time they touched, it saw that and it turned it on for a second. Or I could just hold it here and it would continue to keep it on forever. Okay. Why? Because the question that it's asking, which is if the wires are touching, they are, and they always are. So it just keeps coming back through and doing this over and over. It is actually turning off for a very, very brief moment. You're never going to see it because it happens so quick. Now remember, that's why we have a delay in here. Without the delay, it'd just be turning on and off so fast it would look like it's on. Okay. So that's how this one works. So you could use the bricks that we've been using in these demos to accomplish the task of these two timers. Now make sure that you watch these two little videos so that you can see exactly how they're supposed to operate, and you'll recreate that using your own breadboard and Arduino.